And thank you, Gallia, for appearing with us today from Tel Aviv. In fact, not too long ago, in December, we saw one another face to face in Tel Aviv. For those of you tuning in, Gallia is a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies, certainly one of Israel's major think tanks, and in the area of security studies, arguably the leading center of its kind in the Middle East. Her specialty is on Turkish foreign policy, but beyond that, and more broadly, she's interested in ethnic conflicts within the larger area of the Middle East. She studied and written widely about matters in Cyprus. She's dealt with the Kurdish issues as they arise as well, but for a number of years now, her research has her focus squarely on Turkey. Turkey is a key player, it goes without saying, in Middle Eastern affairs and more in world affairs. At the moment, however, as Günther mentioned, and as Gallia will expand on a bit at the very beginning of her presentation, Turkey is in the news because the country has been visited by a catastrophic series of earthquakes. I won't say any more about that, except to say our hearts all go out to the people of Turkey, and anything and everything that can be done to help them and those in Syria who similarly have been impacted by this massive earthquake should be done. Gallia did her graduate studies at the Hebrew University. She has a Ph.D. from the Department of International Relations. From that university, she's done some teaching there and also at the university in Herzliya. I've had the pleasure of hearing her speak before. She's outstanding in the work she does. And Gallia, it's now our honor and pleasure to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alvin, and thank you very much for the center for hosting me today. I want to share with you a presentation. I hope you will see it. It's okay, very good. So yes, we scheduled this lecture quite a long time ago, but of course current affairs entered, and I really want to start with the devastating earthquake. It was actually two earthquakes. One was in the night and one was in noon, the day after. And from what we know now, it's probably the worst natural disaster in the history of the Turkish Republic. We're talking more than 30,000 casualties now already counted, but we know that unfortunately there are many more people under the wreckage. So yes, I would like to share and convey my sympathies to the people of Turkey and to, of course, the people of Syria also that have also been devastated by this earthquake. This is actually a cartoon from a Greek leading newspaper, and I thought it was very touching, but also it's interesting how also Greece, despite the historical rivalry with Turkey, has really stepped in also and has sent a delegation. And actually the Greek foreign minister is now in Turkey, and he was greeted and he went with a chopper with the Turkish foreign minister. It was really very heartwarming to see how sometimes it's unfortunate that only tragedies bring us together, but at least something brings us together. So this is really, in my view, very touching. Israel has also responded very quickly and very impressively sent a mission very early on. It actually sent the second largest mission to Turkey. We're talking about 450 people, the official Israeli delegation. The largest delegation to assist Turkey comes from Azerbaijan, but Israel is the second largest delegation. It both did search and rescue, but also it prepared to build a field hospital. But when they came to the area, they saw that there was a hospital building, but it was abandoned. So they they basically made it. They created the conditions that they can use it. So basically, it is a Turkish hospital, but it's Israeli doctors who are working there. So it's very interesting that it's such a big mission. I can explain it by the fact that Israel and Turkey recently normalized relations. We will discuss this much more in depth later on in my lecture, but the fact that, yes, now we have normalized relations, I think that contributed to the fact that Israel sent a large mission. Another issue, of course, Israel is close. Israel has the expertise. We should assist our neighboring countries. It's what you should do. And I think Israel was very right about sending the mission. And also, I think there are when you look back at Turkish-Israeli relations, something that had a mark on the relationship was the fact that Israel, in the 1999 devastating earthquake, Israel also sent assistance. And this was really well remembered in Turkey, and everybody talked about it. And I think this shared memory also played a part in the fact that Israel really responded so quickly and in such an admirable way. Of course, it's not only Israeli official assistance, it's also Israeli and, of course, Jewish NGOs responding. So here you see a very nice picture of IsraAid, which is one Israeli assistance organization, and those in orange are Ihud Hatzalah, one of Israel's emergency services. And they cooperated and went together to Turkey, and they are working there. In the picture that you see the bags, this I actually took myself in a high school near my house, in which they collected coats and blankets to be sent to Turkey. And so you really saw this also in a grassroots level assistance. There were some reports today that there were some security threats about the Israeli delegation. It turns out just that it's not a specific security threat to the Israeli groups there, although this is bordering Syria, so it's not the most security-free area, but it turns out that these threats were just that the situation is unstable, and there's looting going on in the earthquake areas, and it's just general instability, but for now the Israeli teams are staying and not leaving. This unfortunately relates to today's discussion. This is pictures of two, unfortunately, people from the Jewish community of Antakya, which is one of the oldest Jewish communities. It's 2,500 years old community. It was a very small community, only 12 people, and its leader and his wife died in the earthquake. So this is very, very, very unfortunate. We see that Rabbi Mendy Chitrik, which is to my knowledge is a Chabad rabbi, he went there and he saved. I mean, the synagogue was damaged there, and he saved some scrolls there. But it was very. I mean, this is such a small community, so it's a big tragedy that this loss happened. We also had, of course, sympathy from Israeli leaders, all the Israeli leaders, be it the prime minister, the foreign minister, the defense minister, and of course, President Herzog had conveyed their sympathies to Turkey. And we also had phone conversations between Herzog and Erdogan, also to express sympathies. And this is, of course, also very important in the relations between countries. And we also had the flags, the Turkish flag on buildings, municipality buildings. So you see on the left the municipal building of Tel Aviv, and this the person who's sharing it is Israel's ambassador in Turkey, Irit Lilian. And also in Ashdod municipality, they also put a flag, the flags together. So again, it's covered extensively in the Israeli media. The Israeli media is very, very much interested in what is happening in Turkey, and so this is getting a lot of attention here. And I think again, I commend my government for really responding quickly and responding the human way that you should do these things. I think that's very important. I'll move now to the rest of my presentation, but again, I hope you all share with me, again, the sympathies to the people of Turkey. So I will get to the 2022 normalization between Israel and Turkey, but first I'll give you a short recap. Maybe some of you remember, maybe some of you don't, but just to put all this relationship in a context. Turkey was the first Muslim majority country to recognize Israel. But basically during the Cold War, it was still in a more less out in the open. It was only after the end of the Cold War and also during the Oslo years that this relationship really bloomed. And so when we talk about the 1990s, we talk about the honeymoon years. Israel and Turkey signed a lot of agreements between them. It was a top-down process, I would say. It was very much pushed by the Turkish army. Less from the bottom and more from the top. But really in the height of the relationship, Israel and Turkey also cooperated in defense matters, and Turkey allowed the Israeli Air Force to train in its airspace. And this was very much, of course, appreciated in Israel. I think despite talking about the 1990s and the honeymoon years, I think the relations really reached a peak actually in 2007 when the late President Shimon Peres gives a speech in front of the Turkish parliament. It's the first time Israel's head of state gives a speech in front of the Muslim majority parliament. He speaks along with the Palestinian president, and it was really, I think this was when Turkey also was basically devoting energy to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but in a balanced way and in a way that really both sides very much appreciated. Also during this time, despite this is already, Erdogan is already in power. Erdogan, his party came to power in 2002 and he becomes prime minister 2003. So it means that we are talking about already 2 decades of Erdogan being in power. But these years, 2007, 2008, also Turkey mediates between Israel and Syria in peace talks. Erdogan himself mediates between in indirect talks between Israel and Syria, and in his last visit, they said that Erdogan already prepared a plane for Assad to come and to talk with Olmert directly. But then we have Operation Cast Lead in Gaza and things, and this mediation process stops. And also we know from several reports that Erdogan felt betrayed, that Olmert started this operation in Gaza and that this negotiation process stopped. So anyhow, 2007, as I said, is really at the height of Turkish-Israeli relations, but from then it starts going downhill. This is the famous Davos incident. Again, Israel's late President Shimon Peres and Erdogan shared the stage together. This was in the time of this operation in Gaza, the first Israeli operation in Gaza, Operation Cast Lead, and Erdogan leaves the stage in angry mode, tells Shimon Peres, "You know how to kill." And this was like the first symbolic manifestation that relations were going downhill. This was only symbolic, but then we have the Marmara incident, in which a flotilla to Gaza of 6 ships in order to break the siege on Gaza, and the Israeli Navy stops this flotilla. The 5 ships, it goes without any violence, but on this ship, the Mavi Marmara ship, which had which most of the passengers on the ship were Turkish. There is also violence, and 9 in the Israeli Navy commando kill 9 Turkish citizens. And this, of course, brings the relationship into direct confrontation. And it takes 6 years until Israel and Turkey put this incident behind them, at least in the formal way. We already had in 2013 that Netanyahu apologized to Erdogan in a phone conversation while during President Obama's visit to Israel. Israel apologized to Turkey, but it takes 3 more years to reach an agreement also about compensation and about Turkey always put also demanded that Israel would stop the siege on Gaza, and it took diplomatic ways of discussions to agree that Turkey would send some humanitarian aid ships that would be inspected in Ashdod and would be delivered to Gaza. As Israel always said, that if it is inspected in Ashdod, you can deliver any humanitarian aid you wish. So it took 6 years to solve the Mavi Marwa incident. Again, at least in the formal level, of course, it has its residue. I cannot tell you that neither the Turkish public forgot and neither the Israelis who saw it at the time as a provocation, neither people forgot about it, but in the formal sense of the crisis, it was solved in 2016. And after that, we have the return of the ambassadors to Ankara and Tel Aviv. And for 2 years, it seems that relations are back on track. 2017 is really quite a good year with mutual visits. And it looks like things are going well, but in 2018, in the context of the US decision to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and there were also events on the border in Gaza. In this context, Turkey decides to withdraw its ambassador, which is a very acceptable diplomatic step, but it also basically tells the Israeli ambassador go home. So it doesn't expel it formally, but informally it basically expels it. And he's also, the pictures are that he's also humiliated in the Istanbul airport, and this is what the Israeli public sees. And Israel tells Turkey's Consul General in Jerusalem to go home, and then Turkey says to Israel's Consul General in Istanbul, go home. And since 2018, we didn't have a high-level diplomatic representation in those countries. We still had diplomatic ties. Diplomatic ties were not formally downgraded, but we did not have the diplomatic representation. So this has basically been the situation since 2018. After this, the failure of the normalization agreement, basically Netanyahu had enough of Turkey and didn't want to hear about repairing relations. But actually, the Turkish side was more eager to repair relations. And interestingly, a sign that things were going to change was in December 2021, when Erdogan actually tells this new formation that is related also to the Abraham Accords, the Alliance of Rabbis in the Muslim World. They come to visit, and he tells them, in a sign that things are going to get better, that he wants to improve relations with Israel, and that relations with Israel are vital for regional stability. And again, Israel is not fast in responding. It takes Israel a few more months, but then also enters into office. We also know that at this time also President Herzog entered into office, and he actually took upon himself as a mission to repair, as one of his missions, to repair relations with Turkey. And he goes in March 2020 to Turkey, and this is a very moving visit, in the sense that, yeah, for a long time you didn't have such a high-level visit of an Israeli person in Turkey, and of course he got all the things that accompany such a formal visit, with flags and the anthem and etc. And this really somehow starts to make a difference also in Israel's public opinion, and also shows Israel that Turkey is serious, because we actually didn't have such pictures after the 2016 normalization. We had a visit of Israel's energy minister to Turkey at the time, and Turkey's tourism minister to Israel, but it wasn't at that level. It wasn't the level of head of state. So this actually started changing also the perception in Israel, and Israel began to understand that Turkey is more serious about this normalization than before. And this process succeeded, and in the late months of the previous government in Israel, basically, yes, Israel and Turkey decide to exchange again ambassador. And here you see this, our ambassador in Turkey, Herzliya, which I previously mentioned, presenting her credentials in a ceremony to President Erdogan. And we also have now, very happy to say, we have now also a Turkish ambassador in Tel Aviv. And basically, we're, again, in the former level, we are back in track. Now, I showed you the ups and downs of Turkish-Israeli relations. And you might want to ask me, so what's going on? What is, and sometimes people say, who's the real Erdogan? Is it the Erdogan who bashes Israel, or is it the Erdogan who wants to repair relations, who's talking about relations with Israel is vital for regional stability? And I think this is a question that definitely occupies us as followers, but also, of course, the decision makers. And I would say I call my talk smooth sailing or troubled waters, and I think there's indication to both elements. So I'll start here with actually the more troubled waters, and where Erdogan is quite problematic, or has been quite a consistent rival to Israel in recent years. This is from a WikiLeaks cable of 2009, a discussion between the Israel's ambassador in Ankara at the time, Gabi Levy, and the US ambassador in Turkey at the time, James Jeffrey. And it was just after there was just municipal elections in Turkey. And Gabi Levy basically says to James Jeffrey, you know, Erdogan is not about getting more points in the ballots. He didn't get any, he says, referring to the municipal elections, he didn't get any more points for bashing Israel. And he says basically to James Jeffrey that Erdogan is a fundamentalist, that he hates us, meaning Israel, religiously, and that his hatred is spreading. And James Jeffrey sums this cable by saying, our discussions with context both inside and outside of the Turkish government on Turkey's deteriorating relations with Israel tend to confirm Levy's thesis that Erdogan simply hates Israel. So that's quite a strong conclusion. Another indication that Erdogan, even if he had a better view on Israel, over the years things deteriorated. So Erdogan visited Israel one time during his lifetime, and it was in 2005. It was in the context of Israel's disengagement from Gaza. And interestingly, in 2019, he starts talking about this visit. And he says, I went to Israel when I was prime minister. Crossing from Palestine to Israel, I was made to wait at the border for half an hour with my wife in the car. I did not understand why they made me wait. I was in Tel Aviv for an official visit. That's the approach of Israel to state leaders. They open doors for whoever they like and close doors for whoever they don't like. They are never sincere. Okay, so this is 2019, not too long ago, and he still has these quite bad memories from his visit in 2005. Now, we have to say that looking at where Erdogan grew up, his upbringing, the fact that he went to religious school, his close relations with Turkey's first Islamist prime minister, Erdogan, it's hard to get out of this upbringing without having negative feelings to Israel. So we have to put this in context. Although we have to say he has consistently called anti-Semitism a crime against humanity. He says this. He has said this several times. He puts also Islamophobia and anti-Semitism together as crimes against humanity, but he does repeatedly say that anti-Semitism is a crime against humanity. Now, of course, Erdogan didn't invent anti-Semitism, not in Turkey, not in general. It existed in Turkey before, but it was more mainstreamed under his rule. And Efrat Aviv, which is a scholar in Bar-Ilan University, and she probably wrote the most extensive research on this subject, and she published a book a few years ago called Anti-Semitism and Anti-Zionism in Turkey, from Ottoman rule to the AKP, to the Justice and Development Party. She sums up the subject by saying, while anti-Semitism was on the rise in Turkey in the 1990s because of liberalist trends, Erdogan is definitely the main reason for growing anti-Semitism in Turkey. She basically says that during his time, it was more legitimate to express anti-Semitic views, and that some journalists and commentators with anti-Semitic views were actually funded by the government and encouraged in a way to express these views in the media. So it basically, it was there, but it became more visible and more mainstream. That was the big difference compared to previous times. But again, it's not new during Erdogan. Another element of Erdogan is how he explains what happened to Turkey in the last few years. Basically, the first decade of Erdogan in power is a decade of success, both of economic success in foreign policy. But then the second decade he's in office, things go downhill, both economically within Turkey, and also Turkey becomes quite isolated in foreign policy. And when Erdogan tries to explain it to its constituency or to the Turkish people, he basically says that Turkey became too strong, and people objected to Turkey becoming too strong, and they tried to weaken Turkey. And there's all sorts of elements that try to weaken Turkey. And one of this element is what he calls the interest lobby. And of course, when you say interest lobby, you understand that there are anti-Semitic tones to it. And this is also relates to growing anti-Americanism in Turkey. And of course, also the element of the Gulen movement. Fethullah Gulen is an Islamic preacher. He lives in Pennsylvania. But at the beginning of Erdogan's rule, they cooperated together in aim to weaken the Turkish army. But after some time, it became an ego struggle between Gulen and Erdogan, and Gulen became a fierce opponent of Erdogan. And Erdogan accuses Gulen of being behind the failed coup in Turkey in 2016, that because of Gulen orders, there was this failed coup in Turkey in 2016. So basically, we see that Erdogan puts together all these elements of Gulen, the US, Israel, the interest lobby, everything together as enemies of Turkey, and that has strong anti-Semitic tones that also make things worse. And of course, and again, we know it from other places that you mix anti-Israel views or criticism of Israel's policy also with anti-Semitic voices. In the height of his criticism against Israel, he used extremely harsh terms against Israel, such as saying that Israel's government barbarism surpasses Hitler. And here you see a picture of Erdogan also meeting Neturei Karta, which you all know, of course, have a very critical view of Israel. So this is something that has been going on quite long, and of course it also influences his basic view towards Israel. This is from 2021, when there was another operation in Gaza, Guardian of the Walls, and here Erdogan even tweeted in Hebrew his criticism of Israel. So just as again, is basically saying that Israel attacks the Palestinians every Ramadan, and that as Turkey, we will always stand up to our brothers and sisters, the Palestinians' brothers and sisters. So again, we know that when there's an operation in Gaza, unfortunately, this also resonates in criticism. Not only Turkish criticism of Israel, but of course, very harsh rhetoric against Israel. We also know that Turkey has been increasing its involvement both among the Palestinians and also among those the Palestinians in Israel, the Israeli Arabs. And it does it through various capacities, both government organizations and NGOs. If we're talking about an important government organization, then we should talk about the Diyanet, which is the religious authority in Turkey, which is a very strong force in a government office in Turkey. And in 2015, the Diyanet added Jerusalem to its pilgrimage locations. And basically, we saw, this was more before the COVID, but we saw municipalities basically subsidized for their employees to go to do pilgrimage in Jerusalem. And although they flew through the Ben Gurion airport, basically most of their visit was in East. I mean, they were in hotels in East Jerusalem, and basically most of their handlings were with the Palestinians. We also know that Diyanet gives scholarships to Palestinians, both for religious studies, but also for general studies. So this has been, again, we see today a bigger Palestinian diaspora in Turkey. We have growing numbers of Palestinians, mostly students, but also other occupations being in Turkey. We see, again, also Turkey's NGOs that are involved both in East Jerusalem. This is one of them. There was a competition for drawing Jerusalem. And we have to say also that empathy to the Palestinians is not something just that Erdogan and his supporters have. It's something that we see in the general Turkish public. It's something that we see that actually unites the Turkish public. And here you see a picture of the popular Istanbul mayor, which comes from the opposition. And here he's in a conference with regard to Jerusalem. And so it's something that is, I mean, it's the sympathy to the Palestinians is broad in the Turkish public, and also the criticism of Israel is also quite broad. So we also have, although this mayor, you know, is very popular, he seems as a very moderate figure from Western perspective, but in terms of criticism of Israel, he's also quite critical. Lastly, and then we'll talk about also the half full side of the glass, but now we're still in the half empty. This was a statement of Erdogan when we had the signing of the Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan in the summer of 2020. Basically, Turkey joined the criticism of the Palestinians on these agreements, and it even threatened the UAE that it would withdraw its ambassador from the UAE because of the deal. Basically, it was seen that because of these Abraham Accords, the Palestinian issue would be forgotten, and instead the process should have been that Israel would reach an agreement with the Palestinians, and then we would see normalization with the Arab countries. But the Abraham Accords basically did it upside down. First, you had normalization with countries such as the UAE and Bahrain, and this is expected at some point also to assist in reaching an agreement with the Palestinians. But Turkey here really joined the Palestinian criticism and was very much against it. But things did change. As I said, we did reach a normalization in 2022. So how did we reach it? So first of all, if we look at 2020, we see a lot of camps in the Middle East. We still see the blockade on Qatar by the Arab Gulf states. We see very animosity between Egypt and Turkey. We see no diplomatic relations, no ambassadors between Israel and Turkey. But things changed. Things started to change in 2021, and really in 2022, we see that the Middle East, everybody's talking to basically everybody's talking. We see a regional detente, and we see that also Turkey is responding to this and is playing along with this regional detente because of two main reasons. One is the economic crisis in Turkey. Turkey is in quite a desperate state in terms of its economy. We see devaluation of the Turkish lira. We see very high inflation in Turkey. We see that Turkey Turkey doesn't have the foreign investment it had in the past, and so from economic standpoint, it has to repair its relation with the Gulf states, because some of these Gulf states, of course, are very rich and can invest in Turkey. But also politically, at some point, really, Turkey was isolated. Its only allies in the Middle East were Hamas and Qatar. So this was not really a good way to proceed. And so you see, really, Turkey starts to warm its relations with the United Arab Emirates, then with Saudi Arabia, then with Israel. And in this the recent soccer cup in the Mundial, we saw Erdogan even shaking hands with Sisi, which was really a very big deal, because basically Erdogan didn't see Sisi as a legitimate leader, and suddenly they shake hands. So this is also influencing positively Israel-Turkish relations. First of all, this atmosphere, the fact that Turkey is now closer to the Gulf Arab states than before, and it basically, in a way, it's not formally joining the Abraham Accords, and you can say actually Turkey is the first Abraham Accords country, because it was the first to recognize Israel. But it's quite positive about, and we see a potential for even cooperation, like a trilateral cooperation between Turkey, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates. So this is really, really helping Turkish-Israeli relations. It's also putting Israel in a position of strength. While in the past, we always said Israel was the side that needed more the relationship in the context of Turkish-Israeli relations. Israel was the more needing side. Basically, its relations with the United Arab Emirates sort of balances its relations. It comes to the relationship with Turkey from a position of strength. So this is something quite dramatic. And if we compare to the 2016 normalization, which failed, I think this gives us some optimism that this time around it might hold a little bit longer. Another element is Iran, which we know as, of course, preoccupies Israel quite a lot. And here we see that definitely Iran is also in a way pushing Israel and Turkey together. Something that really helped Israelis regain their confidence in Turkey was in June, when there were reports that there were Iranians' plans, concrete plans to harm Israelis on Turkish soil, to harm Israeli tourists on Turkish soil. And really, the Israeli and Turkish security forces cooperated very well in order to foil these attempts, and this was very, very important. Also in the context of Azerbaijan, which both Israel and Turkey are very close to, we also see growing tensions between Iran and Azerbaijan, and also here Israel and Turkey are on the same side. And again, I wouldn't overemphasize this element of Iran, but definitely Iran's policies have a unifying element in general. Also, this is part of what brings Israel, of course, and the UAE and Bahrain together. So it also helps in the Turkish context. Another element that actually was always the light in the tunnel in Turkish-Israeli relations, Israel and Turkey are very important trade partners. Turkey is one of Israel's five largest trade partners, and Israel also comes in as Turkey's in the 10 largest export markets of Turkey. We're talking about $8 billion mutual trade in 2022, which is a very significant number in Israeli proportion. Basically, Israel is like a domestic market to Turkey in terms of transportation fees, which are very, very small. We also see a lot of Israeli tourists in Turkey. And last year, we had more than 800,000 Israeli tourists in Turkey. Which is, again, is a remarkable number. It's the largest number of Israeli tourists in Turkey ever. So this is also very, very significant, and it sort of keeps, even in bad times, this keeps the relations, it keeps them alive. It means that Turkey doesn't break completely diplomatic relations with Israel, because the trade is an important element. Another issue that sort of comes that appears, it appeared also in the 2016 normalization and also now, is the question of whether ever there will be a pipeline built from Israel's gas discoveries in the East Med to Turkey. This is basically an idea that Turkey very much supports, and it very much objects the rival idea of Israel building a pipeline, what is called the East Med pipeline, that will go through Cyprus, Greece, and from there to Europe. Turkey really not only wants that the pipeline will be built to its southern port, but it also rejects the idea of the East Med pipeline because it has all sorts of controversies with Greece and Cyprus about the delimitation of the economic waters between Turkey and Cyprus and Turkey and Greece, and in general, the fact that the Cyprus issue is not solved. So something that helped actually the normalization was when the US said that it thinks the idea of the Eastern Mediterranean pipeline is not a viable idea because it's too long, too deep, too destructive environmentally, and shouldn't be advanced. And this was something that signaled for the Turks that that maybe it's the time to repair relations with Israel. I personally don't think that both these pipelines will be built, but there's always this discussion whether they will be built one day. Today, basically, Israel exports to Jordan and also exports to Egypt, and basically sends gas to Egypt, and then in Egypt they have liquefying facilities, and then it goes as LNG in tankers. So this is how Israel exports now. It has an agreement with Jordan, and it also exports through the Egyptian facilities. And actually, very interestingly, Israeli LNG arrives to Turkey, but through Egypt and not through the pipeline that they want. But we know that there's always this hope, at least at the Turkish side, that one day Israel will understand that the cheapest way to export gas is through Turkey, and that LNG is an expensive option and shouldn't proceed that way, but it's there. It's always there. Another element that we know is, of course, Erdogan. Again, this is he always most of the years when he comes to New York to his speech in the General Assembly, in the UN General Assembly, he also meets Jewish organizations in the US. And also this year he did it as a signing that the normalization with Israel is going well. And he revealed that he plans to visit Israel again. Let's hope this time the visit goes more smoothly than the previous visit. But this is something, of course, also Erdogan puts an emphasis on, again, because of his over exaggeration of the Jewish strengths. He does put an emphasis on these visits. But again, a little bit going back to the glass half full, I don't think we can escape a future in which, the Palestinian issue will remain central also to Turkish-Israeli relations in general, of course, in deterioration in the Israeli-Palestinian arena, which we are already witnessing, is something that is highly influential on Israel's foreign policy. But in the Turkish context, we know there is a sort of correlation between if there are positive developments in the Israeli-Palestinian context, then this also resonates to better Turkish-Israeli relations. And on the contrary, if there is a deterioration in the Israeli-Palestinian arena, it also reflects on worse Turkish-Israeli relations. And Turkey has repeatedly stated around the normalization with Israel, this 2020 normalization, that it still stands for the Palestinians and it will not forget the Palestinians. And another very problematic issue is also Hamas presence, Hamas operatives presence in Turkey. We know that Hamas has orchestrated several operations from outside, especially in the West Bank, from its operations in Turkey. There's money laundering going through the Hamas offices in Turkey. There's also issue of certain cyber and espionage going in these Hamas offices. And Israel is constantly pressuring Turkey to shut these offices down. And in Turkey, there's a debate how much Turkey is open to Israeli demands in this respect. I think now it's more open than before, but it's not going anywhere soon, this Hamas presence in Turkey, and the fact that it's problematic from Israeli perspective. My last few slides for these presentations are about the situation of the Jewish community in Turkey. As we know, some of it is very ancient and has been there for a very long time, as we know from this tragic story of these people, the Antakya Jewish community, which has lost it was a very small community, already lost, and it lost people during this earthquake. We know that on the eve of World War I, there were around 200,000 Jews in Turkey. Most arrived to Turkey in the 15th century in the context of their expulsion from Spain. And but from this very, as we know in other parts of the Jewish world, from this very diversified communities around the world, we have now basically some of them remained very small. So we have now about 15,000 Jews in Turkey. Most live in Istanbul. Some live in Izmir, but in other places there are almost no Jews. Basically, it's a community that tries to keep it low. It doesn't, if it's up to it, the community, it tries to keep a low profile. But we know the government is in direct contact with it, and sometimes we do see the community more visible and cooperating with the government. But it's more, the way I see it, it's usually more from because it's requested to show higher visibility. We're talking, unfortunately, about an aging community, and we know that the young are immigrating. Most are immigrating for economic reasons, because of the economic deterioration in Turkey and because of repressive procedures after the 2016 failed coup, in general in Turkey, not targeted against the Jewish community. But we know the young are immigrating, and they actually also have the opportunity. Almost all were eligible for Portuguese or Spanish citizenship in recent years. Now there was some issue that the Portuguese have hardened the criteria, but if there wasn't a window of opportunity, and many of these people, the young people, seized this opportunity and got European passports. So basically, they have also the opportunity to leave. So this is a concern, and I mean, we see this again throughout the world, of these small communities that are having trouble in sustaining and continuing their existence because the young are leaving. On the positive side, again, there were some public manifestations of more tolerance, more acceptance. In recent years in Hanukkah, we see public lighting of the menorah in Istanbul. This is something we didn't see before, but we've been seeing it since 2015. There was also restoration of synagogues. It's more for tourism. It's not for, it's less for the Jewish community, although it does use it from time to time. So we know Edirne synagogue, which is one of the biggest synagogues in Europe, there was a very, very nice restoration of it. And again, it's more for tourism, and we see it again throughout, not only in Turkey, also in other Muslim countries. But it is something that does signal a little bit more tolerance. I want to end my talk with this tweet of, actually, this is the Israel's ambassador in Sweden. And as you know, there was this terrible firing of the Quran in Sweden and in Netherlands, and the burning of the Quran in Sweden and in Netherlands. And there was also a threat to burn a Torah in Sweden. And it was actually foiled by the cooperation between the Muslim and Jewish community in Sweden. And here where this Israel's ambassador in Sweden says, we need to send a clear message when racists and extremists are allowed to abuse democracy and freedom of expression in order to spread hatred of religious minorities by burning holy scriptures, be it the Quran or the Bible. And I think in this note that, yes, some of the things we should also, there are things that also unite us, and challenges that also unite us. I think, and that we can deal with these things together. I think I'll end here. Thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.